everyone. Welcome to the Ashley Barlow Company podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host. If you are a parent, a teacher, or someone who works at a school, or you're a community member, a volunteer, or a staff member at an organization that supports people with special education plans, a coach, a tutor, or even a grandparent, you're in the right place. Sit back with an ice cold glass of lemonade, put on your walking shoes and grab some headphones, roll down the windows and cruise. Ready, set, go. Educate, advocate, collaborate. Hi, Heather.
Hi. How are you
Thank you.
today?
I am great. We were just talking about how we are both kind of tired because we are Memorial Day weekended out.
Yes, we drove so much this weekend and we did like a whole tank of gas just in 3 days. Lots of driving.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of driving.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Well, it was chilly in Kentucky, and we went to the pool because we love the pool so much that we really don't even care if we get in. But we did get in, and the air temperature was 55 degrees. So we were chilly.
Oh, God bless. Are you when you say you went to the pool, is it like a community pool?
Yes, and it's about a block from our house, so we can, kind of go back and forth if we need to. So yeah, it was tolerable.
Oh my gosh. Tolerable is very relative.
Very relative. It's 80 today, so the kids are probably there with us.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
nice.
It is good. So let's start with a little introduction of Heather Avis. Tell us about you and tell us about your family.
Yeah, so I'm Heather Avis. I live in Southern California with my family. I have my husband Josh, and I have been married. This summer it'll be 19 years. Yep. We have 3 kids. Our oldest is Mason. We call her Macy, and she is 12, although she will be 13 on June 29th. So I'm not sure when
Ooh.
this airs, but we're very close to teenagers. Um, she has Down syndrome. My middle daughter, Truly Star, is 10 and does not have any disabilities or any major health issues or any health issues. She's like what's the phrase? Like a bull? I don't know. She doesn't get sick. And when she does, and like 12 hours later, she's like, I'm cool. She's like
Ah,
never sick.
it's amazing.
Her immune system is incredible. And then our son August is 7 and he also has Down syndrome. And yeah, all 3 of our kids came to us through adoption. And Truly, our middle daughter, is Guatemalan and African American. All of our kids were born in California. So we are a transracial, multi-ability family.
Which is so beautiful and has taught the world a lot because you took your stories and the lessons that you have learned in raising your family and in being a part of your family, I'm certain. And you've built this beautiful community called the Lucky Few. So tell us about the Lucky Few community.
Yeah, Mace came home around 3 months old. And she was my introduction into parenthood, not my introduction into disability. I was a special education teacher. I taught at the high school level. I taught a living skills program that was real community based, and um, have always had a heart for the disability community. And so, but I also was the mom who was like, I just want a healthy infant. And then through our journey through infertility and adoption, that stood true. And then we found out about this little girl with Down syndrome who also was really sick. And it's a very long story, but she came into our world, and there was a part of us in the very beginning learning about her that was pushing against that idea of being parents to a child with Down syndrome. And because adoption is usually it's like a hurry up and wait. You just like do tons of work and then you wait for a lifetime. And then it's like, do you want this baby? Pick him up tomorrow. And you're like, oh my gosh, is kind of how the journey can go. So we had just a couple weeks of like wrestling with those feelings where parents, there's a very common story in Down syndrome and a Down syndrome diagnosis of feelings
Right.
of devastation. Why me? And if it's in utero, it usually lasts the whole rest of the term of the pregnancy. If it's at birth, it can last however long. Excuse me. So our journey with those feelings were maybe about a week, and then she came home. And then for me, it was now I have this baby in my hands and she's incredible, right?
Right.
And as we um, got to raise this little girl and grow up alongside her, I just felt so lucky. And I had so many moments where I would be in a community, I'd be out in the community, even like at Target or the park or just with friends who had kids. And Macy was always the only person with Down syndrome in a space. I never saw other people with Down syndrome. And I just thought, I'm so lucky. Like, look at, I get this kid. She's the only kid like her. And every kid's unique, but like there's
Right.
nobody close to her in these spaces and she's rad and I get to be her mom. I felt so lucky. And so in 2000 and I don't know, 11 maybe, I started an Instagram account the year after Instagram started, so like year 2.
Huh.
And it was called Macy Makes My Day. And it was just like a picture a day kind of showing like this is what our life is like with Down syndrome. In a sense, like quote normalizing it.
Right.
Representation is really important. Like creating, just showing that like this is what we do. This is how normal our life is and how awesome Macy is and how rad Down syndrome is. And I started using a hashtag, the lucky few, because I felt like there's few of us who have a loved one with Down syndrome and those of us who do are very lucky. And so I just would say that on pictures. And we didn't have a ton of followers in the beginning. And then our Instagram page got featured by a different Instagram person who had a lot of followers. And we went from like 100 to like, I don't know, 5,000 overnight.
Wow.
And in those early years, 5,000 was a lot of followers. It is a lot of followers, but
Right.
nobody had millions of followers in those early years. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so then we had another push and we got up to like 12,000 followers within a few months. And then we just started growing from there. And I noticed on the hashtag, like you can click on the hashtag and see the pictures on the Lucky Few hashtag that
Right.
other people were using it. And it was always a person with Down syndrome in the picture. And I was like, wait a second, like the first 100 or so are just my kid. It's just Macy.
Yeah.
And then it's like little sprinklings of other families. And then it's to the point where it's like we were talking about this before you hit record, where people are very familiar with a lucky few. They have no idea who I am. And so I think and it's gone on to like I was at a retreat with a bunch of moms who have kids with Down syndrome called Lucky Mamas. And we all together created that what's now known as the Lucky Few tattoo, which is these three arrows, which a lot of people have that tattoo, have no clue where it originated.
Huh.
Um, and it just was like, we talk a lot about shifting the narrative around Down syndrome, about people. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, but it's definitely not all devastation. It's definitely not those initial feelings. It's not scary. Um, and and we need to shift that. And so to connect the idea of you are lucky to have a loved one with Down syndrome really feels like a push towards that narrative shift. And the community just has embraced the concept in such a beautiful way because I think we all feel that way, you know?
We do. Yeah, I agree. I say lucky a lot too. I say lucky when I wake up on vacation and I see like the blue ocean or the beautiful mountains. I always look at my family and say, "Aren't we lucky?" I feel gratitude is something that I feel very naturally. I feel that gratitude, luck kind of
Hmm.
feeling a lot. So I really identify with that word too. And I think that's it. We all kind of feel it. And it's neat that you thought of it kind of in happenstance and
Yeah,
that then it became a thing without really any work at all, which is, I
totally.
mean, work, but not like it was just shouting worth kind of work, which
Right.
is neat.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. What do you think from starting a community like that or building a community like that, intentional or not? What's the neatest thing about the community, the group of parents and community members that have taken interest in that narrative shift that the Lucky Few does?
I mean, the greatest thing about it is anytime you enter a community where there's a commonality, it's like the I see you and I feel seen. Um, it is so powerful that the whole idea of Me Too, and the Me Too movement is its own movement, but the idea of Me Too
Right.
is crosses lines and boundaries outside of that Me Too movement. Um, and I think that's just true. Like you meet someone in our community and you start out as total strangers and within seconds like I know you and you know me,
Right.
and did you guys want to go on vacation together, like it's like did you guys want to Did you guys want to get matching tattoos? Okay, let's do it. You go, I'm joking, but it's true,
It is
right?
true.
It's
It is.
true.
It's even funnier because I think my audience, I have to stifle my laugh or else they won't be able to hear you. But they're probably all like, yes, that is what happened with the so-and-so family.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you have a kid with Down syndrome? Great. You're my best friend.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so, but then there's also a stereotype of you have a kid with Down syndrome, you're my best friend. And we don't have to all be best friends. We don't all have to be like-minded. But I think that um, there's kind of a like-mindedness that happens because we all believe that we need to shout the worth. We all believe that we need to shift the narrative. And it's really beautiful when you find people that are similarly minded to you, right?
Yes, it is. And I will say this, and maybe I'll be like, dang it, I shouldn't have said that. But I have within the Down syndrome space, I used to say all the time, and I still do believe this, but in those early years on social media, because the lucky few was birthed through social media.
Right.
And it goes beyond that. And the work that we do is beyond social media. But that was like our birthplace. And
Yes.
and there's still community there. Like I think that's where the largest community is in terms of the lucky few being in one space together.
Hmm.
And I used to, as the social media started to get real nasty, I would say the Down syndrome community is such a sweet, sacred, safe space within social media. And it's growing and growing and growing. And social media is the powerful tool that it is for better or worse. And if anyone's watched The Social Dilemma, it's showing itself to be more for the
Right.
worse. And our community is not immune to that. So what made me think of this is you said, sometimes you meet people and it's like, we're best friends because we have a kid with Down syndrome. And we have that commonality of we all are shouting the worth of our kids, but there's also within the community more now than ever, a sense of competition, like a sense of following the numbers, who has more, who has less, this person gets this, I want this. And those are all natural feelings to
Right.
have,
Right.
but we can't, I like dear Down syndrome community, we can't let that get in the way of the work that we are doing. It's not about having the most followers or getting the best sponsored ad or being the greatest Down syndrome organization. Like if that's our goal, then we've lost sight
Ah,
of what really
amen.
matters. And I see that happening. It wasn't happening 8 years ago because the community wasn't so saturated within social media. And because I think social media hadn't started to do like the deteriorating, nasty work that it's become. You know what I mean?
Right. I do. And I appreciate that you say that because you are a leader in that community. And I so appreciate you saying that because it does kind of say to everybody else, like, pump the brakes a little bit. And we don't, that's social media though, right? Like we don't
Sure.
have to keep up with the Joneses. We don't
Yep.
all need endorsements and all of that stuff. And there's room for all of us. And there's more importantly, there's room for the self advocates that we
Absolutely.
love. There's room for, like I was on the board of the Down Syndrome Association of Greater Cincinnati, and we worked really hard because we were getting some comments about, like the rock stars. We're only featuring the rock stars, the people that are college graduates that have gotten married or,
Yep.
went and got a job on their own and that kind of thing. And so we've got to be very deliberate about the inclusivity, even within our
Yep.
marginalized group, which is complicated and beautiful and difficult and easy and kind of all of the things all together, but it's a life. It is life. It's a microcosm of what the bigger life is, right?
Totally. Totally. Yeah. And that we're just not, I think that there needs, I guess my caution to our community as I've stepped back and watched it grow in the space is like to really have eyes wide open to what's going on and to I guess for anything, like to check your motives, like and it if you're feeling jealous about somebody or if you're like like the comparison game is going to happen, my kid's not doing this, this kid does this, how come my kid can't be featured? All those things. Those are all feelings that you're going to have, that's fine. But to take a step back and be like what is it that I can do in this narrative shift work that needs to happen? How is it that I can advocate for my kid? And I have found, and I really believe this, that one of our most powerful tools as advocates and allies is to be a listener and a learner. And so for me, whenever I start to feel like those gross feelings of jealousy and competition and comparativeness, I it's because I'm not taking time to listen and learn to what people are saying, and and being willing to like recognize the blinders in my own eyes, you know.
Right.
So it's always a caution for me, like a little red flag, or like a red light, like, Heather, you need to step back for a second and like make the thing that matters, which is advocating for our kids,
Right.
advocating for people with Down syndrome. Like, get back to that. And in doing so, there's a lot of listening and learning that you need to be doing right now, not a lot of like talking.
Yes. Yes. And it's so hard, because you want to, you have a platform, so you want to talk. But I completely agree that that's the best strategy, is to sit back and listen and learn until you feel like you have something that is worthwhile, and then go shout it from the mountaintops, and really see if people can take that and make their own perspective, and kind
Totally.
of tee it into their own experiences and their own value set. So, as you know, we do a lot. The little path that we've carved out here at Ashley Barlow Company is the special education piece of the disability journey. And I know over the past couple of months, you have shared a lot in your community about your struggles, I think, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, and educating and raising your kids in the special education system. So tell us kind of a background or a general beginning of the special education journey with your kiddos.
Yes. I laughed because it's just complicated. Um,
Boy, is it
and
ever.
Ashley Barlow is slaying it. I mean, the work that you guys are doing is so well, like, thought through and marketed and beautiful and powerful. And I just applaud you.
Thank you.
It's been really encouraging for me. You're a boss. Um,
Well, thanks. It's been, you know what, for me, honestly, the best thing, like, this is all in my mind. And I always say I'm like a walking executive plan. So the content is not hard for me, which I know is really weird to some people, but the creative outlet has been so important to me during this really stressful time in my life. So
yeah.
if I did not intend to do this as like, oh, I could either make jewelry or like make some
Mhm.
marketing materials, but actually organizing the stuff and putting the creative stuff on it has been healing for me in a very difficult year. So yes, thank you.
I think that's great. You can tell. I can tell. Like, it shines in that way of you. Of Yeah, that, like, you can see your, not that it's effortless because it's a lot of work, but you just do it so well.
It's
That's
like,
all.
huh.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so your
Okay,
kids.
special ed journey. So like I said, I taught special education. So I have a mild, moderate, and moderate severe teaching credentials. And I will just say that that's a whole other podcast. I would be a very different teacher than I am now. I love teaching special education, and I love special educators so much. I would be a very different teacher than I am now, than I was. Which, I
Me
mean, I
too.
think in all things in life, yes and amen. We've got to be growing and getting better always, right? And that was years ago. That was like 15 years ago. But um, what I'm in Southern California, and Southern California, I would say we are a non-inclusive state in our schools. When I say that, the districts that we have been in, and we've been in a couple, are non-inclusive in that when my kids with a disability, with a certain kind of IEP, with a certain level of needs, walk into a school, they are slated into a special education classroom. If I didn't touch it, they would be there all day. They'd come out for like assemblies, PE, lunch, recess, but they're coming from their special ed space into the general public with their special ed peers. So that's not
Right.
inclusion. That's
No.
not mainstream. That's not any of that. Those On an IEP, those minutes count towards general ed setting. It's not if you're not with your general ed peers, and you're not going to be with your general ed peers if they don't know you, and they're not going to know you if you're in a separate classroom.
Right.
So you're going to have to keep bringing me back, Ashley, because
Well,
we
I
don't have a
just
lot of
really
time.
wanted to like weigh in on that.
Yes.
So, yeah, well, I mean, that is, the thing that irks me about that when that happens, because I do a lot of cases like that. And in my region, it isn't so much systemic that way, but there are definitely schools that say, well, this is how we do it, or, there's kind of a predetermination that's made or something like that. And what irks me is that inclusion isn't going to work if the kids in the gen ed classroom, the kids without disabilities, just see the children with the moderate or significant disabilities or even the mild disabilities, um, that are like in that class down at the end of the hall with the room closed, and they come for assemblies. Well, at assemblies, like if my Jack was a kindergartner and he went to the science one where the guy like shoots steam up in the air, he's going to freak out and he's going to look a lot different than everybody else.
Mhm.
But if they saw him be able to finally conquer a spelling test in kindergarten, and they built blocks with him in kindergarten, and they saw like his joy in just welcoming everybody to class in the morning, and then he reacted like that in the science assembly, they'd be like, oh, that's Jack, like
That's
we thought he
Jack.
was probably going to get excited about that. um right, that's Jack.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't have you can't be for somebody that you don't have a relationship with. And so
Right.
to expect the general population to be for the disability population and not create opportunities for relationship, which our public schools and communities are the hub of the community. It is where
Yes.
our kids go to discover one another and to build relationships. And if they don't have opportunities to build those relationships, they will they will never be for disabled people. And being for disabled people and having relationships with people with disabilities is a little bit for disabled people. It is totally for non-disabled people,
Right.
right? Like we in the Down syndrome community, those of us raising kids with Down syndrome, we could talk for days about how having a child with Down syndrome has changed us for the better and made us better human beings. End of sentence. And knowing not just within Down syndrome, but with the way I see the entire world, the way I approach every human from forever from now on. And it's all those things that like the media and all the popular sayings are pushing for, like inclusion and diversity and all these things. We're pushing for that. And we're
Right.
not creating opportunities for our kids to have relationships with people with disabilities. And if we're not creating those opportunities, we will not have the things that we're pushing for in our world to be more inclusive and loving and kind. It can't happen. It can't happen.
And you're right. I mean, that is such an articulate way to say it, but we have to provide those opportunities. And I think so. I am I'm physically disabled. I was in a gasoline explosion when I was a kid. And so I have a physical disability. I have 4 compression fractures in my back. And I always say, like, I feel lucky to have had that. My husband's had cancer.
Mhm.
Jack has had and still always will have Down syndrome and lots of medical things. We've had a lot of kind of perspective building experiences in our life. And I always say I wouldn't give any of those experiences away because they're my superpower. They make
Totally.
me as dynamic as I am and as passionate and even organized and efficient as I am because I've lived different experiences. And so that being disabled makes me better. Raising a disabled person, just like you said, makes me better. And then being the friend of people with different abilities, oh my God, is that so enriching
Yeah.
and such a beautiful thing. So I agree, but I think us talking about it, yeah, might open the eyes to some people, but it's really that experience of being educated with somebody that
Yep.
makes
Yeah.
the difference. So when your kids went to kindergarten,
Yeah.
they said self-contained classroom over here. And so what'd you do?
Yeah. So actually they start, I think this is nationally. You start at 3 years old, you're offered
Yes.
state preschool.
Yep.
Um or whatever your district preschool if you have an IEP.
Yeah. And some of those are inclusive and some are not. So
Right.
it varies, kind of like state by state, district by district, et cetera.
Mhm. So Macy, the year that she turned 3, our district at the time was piloting an inclusive preschool program. So her preschool experience was inclusive. It was, I've heard people say like backward inclusion, or it doesn't matter
Reverse
where.
inclusion.
Thank you. It's not
Yes.
backward.
Where
Where
they
it's a
they
special
pipe.
like setting, and then
Yes.
they bring the equal amount of gen ed kids into the setting. And there was like a huge wait list for the gen ed kids to get into this preschool. So that was great. We moved to a different city, and she was in a special day classroom. And it was a situation where this because of the school we were in, she would have been so unwelcomed in a gen ed setting that I made the decision for kindergarten to not even try.
Right.
And it's all case by case, person by person, you know what I mean? And
Yes.
that year, the special day class, which would be like in California, we would call it an SDC class. There's a moderate, severe, mild, moderate. Because of Mason, where Macy is academically at the time and now, and because of having Down syndrome, she probably would have gone to the moderate, severe class. But I said, no, I want her in the mild to moderate. And the teacher was phenomenal. It was such a great setup for her for kinder. It was
Yeah.
great. And a gen ed setting would have been horrible in that school.
Right.
So then we moved schools. And first grade, it was like a 50-50. And this is where everything really changed for me when Macy was in first grade. I pushed for the 50-50. She spent it wasn't even 50-50. Let's say it was like 30% of her day was with the gen ed first graders. She like carpet time in the morning, songs, whatever. And then she went back to her SDC class and did everything else. And she would do the lunch, this back and forth thing. And she started having major behaviors, probably because she's getting older.
Right.
But what I was seeing, and like my mama bear senses, it was she doesn't know where she belongs. She doesn't know who her people are. She doesn't
Yep.
know who her friends are. And in the SDC class that she was in, it was K third. There was one other first grader. The most of the kids were in third grade. And I'm like, first graders aren't friends with third graders. That's not socially appropriate. And I was like, she doesn't know where she belongs.
Right.
And that set us off on this like starting our meetings. And the school we were at, it unfortunately was a battle. It was a 3-year battle, first, second, third grade, of basically convincing them that the best place for Mason was in a general education setting with support. It's the with support piece that throws everybody off, because she can't do it without support, and because of money. Because
Yeah.
I'm saying this position that doesn't exist, Macy needs someone who is schooled in inclusive practices.
Right.
Nobody at the school is, nobody at the district is. So I am saying you have to bring someone in here who is going to support the teacher and support Mason so that she has access and opportunity to her general education peers and academics.
Right. Which is
And
what the law
curriculum,
is. The
which is
law
the
is
law. Yeah,
right.
which is why it worked out
Yes.
in the end, because
Amazing.
but it was so many meetings and so much convincing. And as a parent, at the end of the day, to have to convince adults that my kid deserves the same access and opportunity as her neurotypical peers is horrible.
Yeah.
It is horrific. And to leave those meetings like, why? And you leave thinking, why am I even doing this? Like, why would I even give you guys the privilege of my daughter?
Well, I'll tell you why. I went to 20 schools and observed before we made the decision for public school. I observed at 20 schools.
Wow.
And I still landed in public school. Now, our experience has been amazing, like 180 degrees different than the way that it started. Amazing. But it's that gut feeling of, do they have the confidence? To me, it's almost confidence. Do they have the confidence to raise Jack Barlow, to teach him, to have him here 8
That's
hours?
good.
And 20 places had zero confidence.
Yeah.
So we went back to public school and I was like, all right, we got to figure this out. We had the exact same discussion. Mine took about 9 months, all before kindergarten. But I remember saying, when they give you your baby and your baby has Down syndrome, or when you got the diagnosis as an adoptive parent days before you met her, they say, I'm certain for you, as you articulated, they said, now this complicates things. Are you sure you want to pursue this adoption?
Right.
I've helped clients through that. They said to us, you can consider adoption. You can consider, I mean, they didn't say institutionalization, but they said it in a way that made me realize what they were saying. And I thought, gross. And I said
Mm.
in a meeting, in my hospital was very tactful in the way that they said it, but I was like, no, thank you. I said in an IEP meeting, when they gave me my baby, they offered institutionalization. And I said, no, I'm going to knock this baby out of the ballpark. So I had two different extremes. You just have to educate him. And you have to do it in the least restrictive environment. I'm not asking you to knock him out of the ballpark. You
Totally.
don't have these two extremes. You just have the law. And I remember it because it was so articulate when it came to me, because it came from this source of emotional power
Yeah.
that I was experiencing. But yeah, I mean, my parents even met with the school district because, we were trying to think of any angle. My mom had been a teacher. So yes, I completely empathize. And I think a lot of us have been along that journey as well, which is why, I do so much inclusion support and advocacy and lessons
Yeah.
for parents. Um,
Yeah.
so then that takes us to this year,
Oh
which has
gosh.
been even more complicated and frankly traumatic for
Mm.
parents and students in special education. And you've talked a lot about that, your struggles in doing remote and blended and in-person learning with your three
Mhm.
kids that all have different needs. How can you describe that for us?
Um, I mean, can we cuss on this podcast? It
Sure.
has been a bleep show. That's what it's been.
Yes.
It has been, and I'm sure just preaching to the choir here. It's
Yep.
been the roller coaster of it has been unbearable at times. It's been like I have been the least active in education this year.
Me
Really
too.
out of rebellion, like middle fingers up to everybody, like my kid didn't go to school this week. I don't care. They didn't turn in a single homework packet. Bleep you. Like I just,
Yep.
that's just not me. I was just pushed to that. So yeah, this
Me
year's
too.
been
Even Ashley Barlow. I haven't looked at Jack's attendance, but in order to do attendance, Jack had to do this stupid, like, quote unquote, gen ed computer thing. And if I got him from school, we even had to change our day because it was affecting my psyche. So my husband and I switched our half days of work so he could pick him up, because even just picking him up, I would just cry to the teachers, and that wasn't working. So that was not helping anything. And so if I had him in the morning, we didn't do it. I'm like, why? What? This is not helping. It's hurting me. It's hurting our relationship because he doesn't want to do it. He knows it's stupid. He's in fourth grade and it's first grade and kindergarten curriculum. It's stupid. It's repetitive. He can't pass it. So I end up doing it. Why are we
right,
doing this?
right.
Why are
Why
we doing
are we
this?
doing this?
So yes, a significant
Oh
reduced
gosh.
demand.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like it doesn't even deserve a lot of time to talk about just because I think all of us were there, My kids didn't have an option to go back in person until March. And so at the first week of February, I said to me, after dozens of meetings with Macy's IEP team, I just said to them, Macy will not be looking at a computer. Also, I'm not homeschooling, so you let me know what we should do. Like,
I love it.
we're done. We're done. And I really feel like in terms of like Macy was in 6th grade, so let's just add fuel to the complicated fire of she was starting middle school this year.
Right.
And middle school was already so daunting in my mind. And she was going from a school of 500 kids where I'll rewind real quick and just say we ended up moving another time. God bless. And we went to a school. She started in 4th grade. It's where we live now. It's 500 kids. They didn't have any inclusive options for her. And I worked with the most incredible teachers and staff to make it work. And what had happened, this feels important to me. Sorry,
I love this.
I'm going off a little bit. When we were in the school prior to that, where we had tons of meetings from 1st grade to 3rd grade to prove that she should be in an inclusive setting, what we got written into our IEP was an inclusion specialist 5 hours a week, an hour a day to modify curriculum. That is significant amount of minutes. It
Yeah.
is a significant amount of minutes. She has a one-on-one aid, and we had some other things in the IEP. Now, as we know, IEPs are legally binding documents. So once it is in there, this to me was her passport to education.
Right.
And when I had a mentor when Mace was real young, her name's Nancy Lidekin, and she ran a company called Club 21 in Pasadena, California. And
One of my
Nancy,
favorite people in the whole universe.
she's unreal. And
Ah,
Nancy said to me when Macy was in first grade, when I was first like dealing with that, we were living in the Pasadena area. And I was crying one day at Club 21, and Nancy said to me, Heather, she showed me that analogy with the passport. You need to get a passport for Mason, and you can't give that back. Like once you've been given that passport. And so I feel like most kids walk to school and they enter a school and they're like, here's your passport to access and opportunities, and every kid gets that. And Macy walks in and they're like, we're not giving you a passport because you can only do certain things. And so we fought for that passport. We got the passport. Again, this is an analogy, friends. There's not a real passport. And now we have that. And we are going into seventh grade, basically having missed sixth grade. She's
right.
going from a fully inclusive environment in fourth and fifth grade with the supports in place that was life altering for her, all of her peers and her teachers. Her fifth grade teacher and I are now dear, dear friends. It
Yes.
changed her life having Macy in her class.
Yes.
She never in a million, and she was like, I can't do this. The first couple weeks of school, she's like in tears. She told me later, because we're friends now, I can't do this. This is too hard. I can't do this. She's been teaching for 15 years, never had a kid with Down syndrome in her class.
Ah,
So we've like paved or like, I don't know, broken down walls, whatever. She goes into junior high. Now we're going to seventh grade. There's 1,500 kids. Nobody knows her, right? Like she's got
mhm,
her handful of friends from fifth grade, but they've gone a full year without seeing each other. And their friendships were new already. So
right.
that feels like I don't know. Will they even have classes together? And it is like, do we just put her into the moderate severe class?
Hmm.
Like into the self-contained classroom, or do we continue this fight where her academics, and it's academics don't give you access to inclusion is not based on academics, that let's make that very clear.
Yes. Thank you.
However, her academics are so significantly lower than her grade level that it creates opportunities for creativity. I was going to say a challenge. That is not what we're saying.
That's a
So
growth mindset that you've
yes,
got there, Heather Avis.
but I am so tired, Ashley. I could just start weeping right now. I'm so worried for her going into seventh grade, but I can't hand over the passport. Like for me to
Yeah.
say, we'll do self-contained. And I think she would hate it. I think she would sit in that classroom and look outside and be like, what the heck? Like,
Well, yeah. And maybe, I'm happy I'm happy that you could articulate it this way because I feel like there's a pep talk in there. And I mean, I need to hear the pep talk too. And I think so. Here's what I think about that. Every single child had a hard year. My Griffin, your truly, our children that have Down syndrome, they all had a hard, messed up, wacky year. Griffin had a teacher that has this hilarious Southern accent that wore a mask all year. He has
oh,
no
bless.
idea. He does not know. He does not know math. He literally doesn't know it. Somehow, I don't understand this, but he failed every math test and he has straight A's. I'm not quite sure how that works, but he they got through it and that's the victory.
Hmm.
So I think the other kids that are going to be in 7th grade also didn't get 6th grade. There's going to be a lot of reteaching. There's going to be a lot of muddling through. And that's not just this year because academically, in some cases like math for example, you go from geometry to algebra. Well, you don't need geometry to do algebra, right? Like
Mhm.
some concepts they might have to reteach, but it's when you go from algebra 1 to algebra 2 that you need reteaching. And if there's 2 years in the middle of that, these kids are going to be juniors in high school, the kids in the gen ed classrooms, and the teachers are going to say, why didn't you get that concept? And they're going to be like, COVID,
Because of
remember?
COVID, a whole year,
Because of
right,
COVID.
right.
So I think that schools are going to be different. And not only schools, but humanity is different.
Mhm.
I think we are going to have teachers that are far more empathetic to kids and their struggles and what they've been through, because let's face it, a lot of people in the world have not experienced real trauma. A lot of people haven't
Yeah.
experienced real loss. And now we all have.
Yeah.
And some people did it more gracefully than others, but man, those teachers, the majority of teachers handled it very gracefully, and they have to have learned from it. And that kind of perspective building experience that they had trying to do their jobs differently has to have made them have a better inclusive outset, right?
Yeah. I mean, we can hope, like I have in a few hours, we have Mason's IEP with her team to talk about and figure out 7th grade. And I, like you, I didn't look at 21 schools for this next year, but I looked at every option possible. And I mean, dear California, get with the program. I mean, I cannot even tell you how horrible California is about inclusion. There's
Right.
like 2 inclusive schools in our entire state.
Mm.
Our entire state. And there's a handful of inclusive programs, but we are a non-inclusive state.
So,
It's
you know,
absurd.
well, I want to talk about that, because another thing that you could do is, um, so that is a procedural violation of the law, not following the law. And sometimes when there's a procedural violation, and this is for everybody out there, I'm not giving Heather Avis legal advice. I'm just saying, um, there's a thing called a state complaint. And I went to a CLE one time through Rights Law. And the continuing legal education is what that is. And they talked about how to affect systemic change by filing a state complaint. And
Mhm.
so I'm just wondering if you listeners are out there in a state where you feel like that isn't happening, that they're saying we don't offer inclusive environments, that is against idea. The
Right.
idea provides this continuum of placements. And so I just wonder about looking into a state complaint, no matter where you are, whether it's California or some other
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah,
That's really interesting.
that is interesting. So, I want to leave time to talk about your
Yes.
book, but I want to talk about one topic before that, because I know you do a lot of work in this area. Part of my mission here at Ashley Barlow Company is to address the differences in outcome, the disparity in outcomes that happen in education as they relate to children of minority races and ethnicities. And so, we have a lot of different incentives that we do. If an organization like Club 21 actually bought the Special Education and Advocacy Lab, and then we give the same number of licenses to them to donate to an organization that primarily helps children of minority races and ethnicities so that they can donate, and we are helping to get the word out about special education advocacy. I know you've done a lot um, in that field. So can you talk to us about how, how your work looks in that arena?
In the arena of like the intersection of race and disability?
Yes,
Is that what you
exactly.
mean?
Race, disability, and in the school setting, if you have done anything in the school setting.
You know what? I haven't done anything in the school setting outside of just like what I'm doing with my kids, you know.
Right.
Um so I am not like studied in the law. I'm very much just, and a lot of people aren't studying law. I'm doing the thing. I'm a creative, I'm a writer, I'm an advocate, I'm an ally.
And
And
that's amazing.
and so my approach to those things, and I talked about this earlier, is being a listener and a learner and teaching and encouraging people to be that. In the conversation around race and the intersection of race and disability, the only voices who we should be listening to are people of color and people with disabilities and people of color with disabilities, disabled people of color. And if you're not listening to those voices, that's the starting point. And then relationship. I mean, relationship changes everything. And it gets really, really tricky because relationship requires proximity. And if you're in a predominantly white, affluent space, you either move or you miss out on those relationships. And there's going to be some kind of negative repercussion to missing out on those relationships that most people, and this sounds judgmental and I don't mean it that way, most people are very happy to be missing out on those opportunities because it's the idea of like ignorance is bliss.
Right.
And it just, once you pull that rug up and see what's happening and the injustices that exist within education and people of color and disability, you're like, shoot, I wish I could put the rug down. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it's hard. It's hard and yucky, the reality of it. So um if you're
That's
in those places where you don't have proximity to create relationships, then you still have opportunity with tools like the internet and books
books.
and TED Talks and Instagram accounts and all of those things. So I don't totally know how to answer your question.
Oh, I love that answer.
Okay.
I love that answer because, something that I keep talking about is how um, when we address this intersectionality, we need to do it as a philosophy. We can't do it as a checklist.
Yeah, that's great.
We have to do it as a mindset, and the mindset is learning right now, and that is, if that's where you are in your mindset, then that's where you are in your mindset. You have to start somewhere. And so I love that answer, so that we're really, that's what I do here, is I encourage people to sit and listen and to start where they are and then to try to move forward.
Yeah.
So I think that's really wise. And it's an answer that isn't an answer because you're practicing what you preach.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's true.
I loved it. That was perfect. Okay, so you've got a new project, you've got a book, and I can't wait to hear about it. Tell us about your new book.
Yes, my first children's book is coming out this month, June 29th, which coincidentally is Macy's birthday, which is so fun.
It's
I
a
don't choose
coincidence?
Well, I don't choose the date the books come out. The publisher does. And if you're publishing with a publishing house, books come out on Tuesdays. And so it just happened to be a Tuesday. I know.
Yay. That is fun.
Also to you and the listeners, our lawn is being mowed right now. So I apologize if it's like very annoying background sound.
I cannot hear it.
Yes, it's called Different, A Great Thing to Be. And it stars a little girl named Macy who guides us through embracing and celebrating our differences and the differences we see in others. And she's based off of my Macy. So it is a book for everybody. I mean, Macy, the character, has Down syndrome, but we don't ever talk about Down syndrome or disability in the book. And that was intentionally so, not because those are things we're avoiding. It's just the overall idea of the book is everybody is different. And my inspiration for writing it is, especially as our kids are little, there's such an opportunity to shift that narrative around different. Everybody has felt different at some point, and that feeling has been attached to some kind of a negative feeling, right? Like it's an uncomfortable feeling. And if we just can see the differences in people, embrace and celebrate them and in ourselves, then I'm hoping that it will create a kinder, more inclusive world.
Oh, I love that. And we have to see them. I say all the
Yes.
time, there isn't a word for this in English, but I was a German teacher, so I speak German, and there's a word in German, it's bemerkment, and it means noticement if you
Okay.
translated it. So we have to notice it. And in the disability population, you and I are probably about the same age because our kids are about the same age. So, I grew up in a school where the kids with disabilities were down
Yep.
the hall in the room with the closed door. And it even had paneling, which none of the other rooms had. I thought that
Oh
was
my
weird.
gosh.
Like knotty pine paneling. It was so weird. And we didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about what happened in that room. We didn't talk about disabilities. The kids actually even had lunch in that room. And so we didn't know. And actually just noticing differences without some judgment is the first step to then being able to celebrate them. Because when we
Totally.
didn't talk about it, we didn't notice it, or we noticed it and we then judged it as bad, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I feel like as an adult, there are things about me that are different that when I was a kid, I hated about myself because I wasn't like everybody else. And I think that we've come a long way in humanity in that there is this understanding of diversity is so important. I didn't hear that growing up. That wasn't like key messaging in my childhood. I
Hmm.
think that's a newer concept, that key messaging. It feels more global, or
Agree. Yeah.
in the US, that's where I am. So yeah, I think that opportunity to see those differences is really important too.
So I want to know how you wrote a book. I wrote this. I read the press release and it says that it rhymes, which I think I had seen because you published like a little excerpt of it on Instagram one day, and it said it rhymed, and I was like, so I'm trying to picture you in your kitchen with the creativity during a pandemic with three kids navigating special education to be like, oh, I'm going to write a book about being different and it's going to rhyme. Like how did you do that during a pandemic?
Okay, so it started way before that, but the publishing spaces takes a lifetime. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
the book was submitted in 2019 to publishing houses. I probably wrote it in 2018.
Okay.
And I
Wow.
wrote it on the airplane, and I was coming home from a trip, like a work trip, and it just happened. And I knew I wanted to write a children's book. I've been thinking about it, and so I had gone back and forth between like writing or prose, or rhyming, and um I wrote a rhyming book. But my contract with my publisher is 2 books. And so I did have to write my second book during the pandemic. And I already had an idea of what I wanted it to be. And that was like, I got to get out of the house to out into nature. So I went to a park.
Oh,
I don't think
okay.
I'm allowed to, how much I'm allowed to say about the second book. But the first book, we're in the, like at the exact time that we're in the process of marketing and pushing it out, I'm in the editing process for my second book
Okay.
with the
Okay.
editor. So I did
Oh,
do that
that's so
one. And
great.
that one also is rhyming. Actually, this is a dream of come true for me to to be a children's book author. This is what I want to do. And I somehow know how to do that. I didn't know I did.
That's awesome. So you taught yourself that really cool skill that you've got. I think, I think it's the neat thing about the way that the inspiration comes. It's just that's very inspiring to me, and the book is so needed. I do outreach in Jack's classroom, and
Mhm.
occasionally I have a friend that will ask me to do outreach in their classroom. And there are books out there that are disability specific, but I love the idea that this one isn't disability specific intentionally, and it just celebrates differences. So to me, I see it as an add-on to the lesson that we could, do at the end, maybe of a 60-minute outreach lesson for kids to say, and guess what? We're all different, and that's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're working on a kit for classrooms, like a classroom kit with some little lesson plans and some printables and things to have. So stay tuned for that too.
That is very important. So, one thing, this is my last question of the day, and I think it tags on to the book. So you've written and you've talked a lot online about how having Macy, your first child, your oldest, radically changed how you view yourself and others. And we talked about it a little bit before, but I was wondering if you could even just give an example or kind of touch on that as we close, because that idea of different, that
Right.
idea of celebrating differences changes all of us so significantly.
Yeah. My sweet little magical Macy, she doesn't fit into any of the molds that society has laid out for all of us. And she she just shows, I say that when she leaves my front door, she walks into a world that questions her value and worth. And she continually shows up in spaces fully authentically as herself, uninhibited, and sees you and meets you and accepts you and loves you fully authentically as yourself. And granted, there's people she doesn't like, and she's not friends with everybody, but her initial go-to is, I'm curious about you. There's no judgment there. If anything, she'd be like, you've got a mole on your face,
Uh-huh.
like it's not, she has this ability to see the intrinsic value and worth in others, that I did not know how to do before her and would not know how to do without her. And it is a game changer, because it's not just that I can look at other people and not question their worth. And it can be a person that I think is just horrid in what they're doing with their choosing to do with their life. And I still have to be able to see them and say, you have value and worth because you're a human being with breath in your lungs. And then to be able to turn that on myself, um, that when I don't fit into a certain mold, or when I am like the measuring sticks, my husband and I talk about this all the time. Like, how do we measure success? How do you measure your worth? And society has handed us all these measuring sticks on how to do that.
Yeah.
And for me, every one of them makes me feel insignificant and tiny. And then Macy enters my world and just creates new measuring sticks. And they're not straight up and down. There's not inches. There's not numbers even. It's just, oh, it's like a big circle. Like, oh, you're alive. You're worth it. You're worthy.
Yeah.
It changes everything.
And those measuring sticks, they're different. And different was okay, but then when you really get to know a person with a disability, they're better.
They're better.
It's better. It teaches us to be better. Oh, that's
100%.
really beautiful.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. I know we're going long here, but having two kids with Down syndrome, Mason is my oldest, and um, she's not the kid who's going to, she might not live independently. She might, I'm not claiming any of this.
Right.
Um, she probably won't drive a car. She probably won't be the college grad. She's not going to be the kid like giving a speech at her commencement ceremony, or, like she's not going to be that kid with Down syndrome that you even mentioned here in the podcast, like that
Yeah.
the ones that were like celebrating because they're more like us. I'm not sure,
Right.
but
Right.
August will be my son. August, like he wants to drive, he wants to have kids, he wants to be married, he wants to have like run a business. He's going to do all of those things. But Macy was my starting point, and having both of them, it's like both of you are magic as you are. I don't need Mason to have better speech. I don't need her to be able to read better or do all these different things. Um, who she is enough, period, full stop. And August is doing all those things, like he's going to do all those things. It doesn't make him better than Mason. It makes him
Right.
August. And I just am grateful for that experience, because again, another caution to our community, there's not a best way to have Down syndrome, you know? And we
Yes.
and we need to make sure that we're not feeding that narrative of if you're this way with Down syndrome, then you're better. Or
Oh, thank you.
right, we
Yes.
can't feed that. So I'm so grateful for my experience with my two kiddos, because they've just taught me so much. We could do a whole podcast on what our kids have taught us, right? A
I know.
series.
Well, I know that you actually do a whole podcast on that. So thank you for boiling it down. I just thought it was such a nice transition and a great way to end. So thank you so
Yeah,
much
thank
for
you, Ashley.
yes, thank you. And we'll have you back. Will you come back and share more wisdom?
Anytime. I would love to. And thanks for your wisdom too. We'll be in touch on a personal level.
For sure. For sure.